Cold does not kill slowly, it erases. In fractions of a second, it freezes blood inside veins, paralyzes lungs, transforms living flesh into white stone. And yet, in this place where physics should forbid existence, there are open eyes, there are beating hearts, there are creatures that do not merely survive the impossible, they dominate it. Between the 90th degree north and the geographic South Pole, there are two worlds that most human beings will never see. The Arctic is an ocean imprisoned beneath layers of floating ice, surrounded by tundras stretching across millions of square kilometers of absolute silence. Antarctica is the opposite, a solid continent buried under kilometers of compressed ice, swept by winds reaching 300 kilometers per hour, and temperatures plunging to 90 degrees below zero in the austral winter. In these two extremes of the planet, where sunlight disappears for entire months and the ocean freezes to the horizon, nature wrote its most brutal laws and its most extraordinary miracles. There is a sound that precedes all death in this place. Silence, not the ordinary silence of sleeping cities or nocturnal forests, but a silence with texture, with weight, with physical pressure upon the eardrums. It is the silence of the Arctic at 50 degrees below zero, when the air is so cold that the very molecules seem paralyzed, and any sound, the crack of an ice branch, the breath of an animal, rings like an explosion inside the white stillness. It is in this silence that the polar bear, Ursus maritimus, awakens. She emerges from her den, carved into the snow, with two cubs smaller than rabbits pressed against her belly. Creatures so fragile that a single day of exposure to the outside wind would kill them within minutes. For 4 months, she lay motionless, without eating, without drinking, converting her own fat into milk with 50% lipid content, the most caloric produced by any land mammal. She lost 200 kilograms gestating the future. And now, when her cubs finally touch snow for the first time, the entire world seems to hold its breath. What makes an animal truly Arctic is not the fur, not the fat, not the size. It is the invisible biochemistry running through its veins. The Arctic fox, Vulpes lagopus, weighs less than 4 kilograms, the equivalent of a thin domestic cat, and yet sleeps outdoors at minus 40 degrees without shivering once. The secret lies in a mechanism called non-shivering thermogenesis. Its mitochondria generate heat directly, without the muscular contraction that consumes energy, maintaining internal temperature at 40 degrees positive, while the exterior attempts to assassinate it. Its paws possess a countercurrent vascular system. Warm blood descending through arteries heats the cold blood rising through veins in a perpetual cycle of thermal self-recovery. It can lose up to 70% of body heat through its extremities without compromising vital organs. When snow covers everything to the horizon and there is absolutely nothing to eat, it follows the polar bear like a shadow, waiting for scraps. A 4-kilogram creature surviving in the shadow of a 700-kilogram predator, not out of weakness, but out of pure intelligence. Beneath the ice of the Arctic Ocean, where sunlight arrives filtered in blue as through a glacial stained glass window, there exists a forest. Not of trees, but of algae, Melisera arctica, that grow hanging from the underside of the ice like curtains of dark green silk, swaying gently with the submarine currents at 0.8 degrees below zero, a temperature at which seawater remains liquid only because of its salinity. In this inverted, microscopic, and absolutely fundamental forest lives the Arctic copepod, Calanus hyperboreus, a transparent crustacean 3 centimeters long that accumulates fat with such efficiency that its body becomes a drop of living oil. During the polar winter, when darkness lasts 6 consecutive months and algae production ceases completely, this animal dives to depths of up to 2,000 meters and enters diapause, a state of suspended animation that reduces its metabolism to 2% of normal. It does not sleep. It pauses time within itself. And when light returns in the Arctic spring, it rises again, resurrected to feed fish, seals, and whales. The entire Arctic food chain begins here, in a transparent shrimp that learned to half-die. The ringed seal, Pusa hispida, is born inside a snow cave that its mother carved with her own claws on the surface of a floating ice floe. The newborn arrives into the world as white as its surroundings, with a coat called lanugo that insulates it thermally in the first days of life. But this same whiteness that protects it from the cold condemns it to risk. It can barely move, and the polar bear detects the scent of birth from 2 kilometers away through the ice. For 12 days, the pup does not enter the water. For 12 days, its mother nurses it with milk of 45% fat, quadrupling the pup's weight while watching for every sound around her. When the polar bear finally locates the den by scent and plunges its front paws through the snow with the full force of 400 kilograms, the mother seal dives through the breathing hole and disappears into the dark depths, sometimes with her pup, sometimes without. This is nature's first decision in the polar world: who stays, who goes, and who never returns to the surface. The bowhead whale, Balaena mysticetus, lives permanently in Arctic waters without ever migrating to the tropics. The only great whale that spends its entire life beneath and around the ice. It possesses the largest proportional head of any animal on Earth, 1/3 of its total body length, and uses this structure as a living lever to break ice up to 60 centimeters thick with upward blows, creating breathing holes where solid walls previously existed. Its baleen plates, the longest of any cetacean, reach 4 meters in length and capture copepods and euphausiids with a precision that no human technology has been able to replicate. But the most extraordinary thing about this creature is what no one sees. Its songs change completely each season. No winter reproduces the vocal patterns of the previous one, as if each Arctic season demanded a new language to be sung. Longevity studies based on amino acid analysis in the ocular lens indicate it can live between 150 and 200 years. There are bowhead whales alive today that were young when Napoleon existed. In Antarctica, the emperor reigns, and the emperor pays a price that no other bird in evolutionary history has ever been capable of paying. The emperor penguin, Aptenodytes forsteri, incubates its single egg during the Antarctic winter, the most deadly season on the planet, when winds reach 200 kilometers per hour and temperature drops to 60 degrees below zero. It does this standing upright on the ice, without a nest, without shelter, without eating for 65 consecutive days, balancing the egg on its own feet and covering it with a highly vascularized abdominal fold of skin. Alone, it would lose more heat than it can generate. So it does not remain alone. Thousands of males form a huddle, a compact, warm, rotating mass, where individuals on the outer edges, exposed to the lethal wind, gradually spiral toward the heated center, while those who are at the center advance to the periphery. A perfect thermal democracy without leaders, without hierarchy, guided only by the physics of heat and the instinct of an animal that learned that collective survival is more powerful than any individual adaptation. The Arctic wolf, Canis lupus arctos, is white not by aesthetic accident, but because its pigment metabolism was deactivated by evolutionary pressure. Producing melanin costs energy, and energy in the Arctic is the most precious currency in the universe. It hunts caribou, Rangifer tarandus, in groups of 4 to 7 individuals, using a tactic that ethologists call differential resistance testing. The pack does not chase the nearest prey, but observes the herd in motion, looking for the animal that trots with a slightly asymmetric stride, the one that breathes half a second faster, the one that turns its head back with a frequency slightly different from the others. They identify the vulnerable one before initiating the hunt, conserving energy in a land where every wasted calorie is a calorie that can mean the difference between surviving the next winter or not. When the pursuit begins, it can last hours and cover 50 kilometers. The Arctic wolf does not run faster than the caribou. It calculates with greater precision where the prey will exhaust itself. There is something that happens in the Arctic spring that happens nowhere else on the planet. With the same intensity of speed, everything explodes simultaneously. When polar light returns after months of darkness, it arrives in massive doses, 24 continuous hours of possible photosynthesis. Ice algae multiply in hours. The phytoplankton, Phaeocystis puccetti, forms blooms covering thousands of square kilometers of ocean with a blue-green hue visible from space. This cascading food explosion, algae, zooplankton, fish, seals, whales, bears, happens in windows of weeks, not months. For animals that synchronize their reproductive cycles with this window, the season is a feast. For those that arrive too late or too early, it is the fast that can kill. The Arctic tern, Sterna paradisea, a migratory bird that travels approximately 90,000 kilometers per year between the two poles, times its arrival in the Arctic with a precision of days to capture exactly this peak of abundance. It lives 30 years and travels throughout its life a distance equivalent to 3 round trips to the moon. The snowy owl, Bubos scandiacus, is the only truly Arctic strigid, capable of surviving permanently above the Arctic Circle without migrating to warmer regions. It does so through a combination of adaptations that make it essentially a sphere of plumage. Its feathers cover its talons, beak, and even its eyelids with layers of filoplumes that eliminate virtually all surface heat loss. But its most remarkable secret is auditory. Its ears are positioned asymmetrically in the skull, one slightly above the other, creating a temporal disparity in sound arrival that its brain processes to triangulate the exact position of prey 30 centimeters beneath the snow without seeing anything at all. It plunges headfirst into the snow, captures an Arctic lemming, Dicrostonyx torquatus, in motion, and returns to the air having never made visual contact with its prey. The snowy owl's population peaks oscillate dramatically every 4 years, precisely the lemming's population cycle. Predator and prey, bound by a biological equation neither of them chose. Tundra moss and lichen, Flavocetraria nivalis and Cladonia rangiferina, together form what ecologists call an impossible carpet, a layer of plant life covering millions of square kilometers of Arctic permafrost and surviving conditions that would destroy any other terrestrial plant. Lichen is not a single organism. It is a mandatory alliance between a fungus and an alga or cyanobacterium, living in a symbiosis so integrated that neither partner survives alone in nature. This partnership allows lichen to photosynthesize and grow at any temperature above 0.1 degrees Celsius, taking advantage of the few hours of surface thaw that the Arctic summer offers. Lichen grows less than 1 millimeter per year, meaning a piece 20 centimeters in diameter on an Arctic rock is probably 200 years old. When the caribou that depend on these lichens to survive winter graze an area, it takes decades to recover. The biological pace of this place is measurable not in generations but in centuries. There is a form of light in Antarctica that researchers who have witnessed it describe with a vocabulary that seems closer to religion than to science: the aurora australis. Not because it is supernatural. It is perfectly explained by the ionization of solar particles in the atmosphere, but because in the total silence of the polar plateau at 3,500 meters of altitude, with no artificial light source for hundreds of kilometers, it fills the sky from horizon to zenith with curtains of green, purple, and gold that move with a fluidity that appears animated by intention. The emperor penguins sleeping beneath it in the darkness of the Antarctic winter do not perceive it the way humans do. Their eyes are optimized for different light frequencies. But the phocids resting on the sea ice react to variations in light intensity with measurable changes in heart rate, suggesting that the aurora somehow registers its presence even in the most primitive systems of biological perception. Beauty does not need to be understood to be felt. What happens when an environment becomes too warm for its inhabitants is not an extinction. It is first a silence. Arctic sea ice extent has lost an average of 13% per decade since 1979, according to data from the United States National Snow and Ice Data Center. For the polar bear, Ursus maritimus, each week less of sea ice is a week less of access to the ringed seals that are its primary caloric source. Studies published in the scientific journal Nature Climate Change have documented a direct correlation between the number of ice-free days and the mortality rate of cubs. For every 10 additional ice-free days, cub survival drops by 17%. It is not a catastrophe visible in a single moment. There is no avalanche, no flood. It is a lethal slowness, an imperceptible subtraction of conditions accumulated over decades, until one day there are fewer bears than there were before, and then fewer still. And the tundra that once resonated with the sounds of hundreds of animals begins to sound like an archive of itself. Life at the polar extreme is not an exception to nature's rule. It is its purest expression. Here, where every calorie counts, where every degree of temperature is negotiated in adaptations that took millions of years to calibrate, evolution wrote its most elegant and most cruel algorithms. The polar bear that dives into the ocean at -1 degree to pursue a seal, the bowhead whale that sings a different song each winter, the emperor penguin that warms its egg on its feet for 65 days of darkness and lethal wind. Each of them exists because in an immeasurable chain of generations, those who failed died, and those who found the solution lived to transmit it. There is no heroism in this, no intention, no conscious narrative. There is only the implacable physics of cold meeting the stubborn chemistry of life, and life, as it always has, as it always will, finding a way to continue. What threatens these animals today is not the cold they mastered millennia ago. It is the heat we created. And the question that will remain without easy answer is this: can the adaptation that took millions of years to occur remake itself in decades?